The call came in at 3:19 in the morning. Franklin Dubois was already awake. He usually was at that hour. Something about the years of overnight shifts at the plant had rewired his body so that sleep came in 2-hour stretches now, like a timer that kept resetting. He was sitting at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee he hadn't touched, looking at the stack of mail he'd been avoiding for 3 days, when his phone buzzed against the wood. The screen said, Renata. He picked it up on the second buzz. Frank. Her voice was quiet in a way that told him she wasn't alone, or was trying not to be heard. I'm sorry. I know it's late. I didn't know who else to call. He didn't ask why. He asked where. She said she was in the parking lot of a Walgreens on Route 9. The one by the old lumber yard, she said, like he'd need the clarification. He knew exactly which one. He'd bought her a birthday card there 8 years ago when she was still just a name he knew through mutual friends, before she'd become someone he thought about every day for reasons he was only beginning to understand. Stay there, he said. I'm coming. He didn't ask what happened. Not yet. Franklin Dubois was 44 years old and lived alone in a house that was slightly too big for one person, but not quite big enough for the family it had been built around. His wife, Connie, had taken their younger son to her mother's in Savannah 2 years ago, and then she'd taken herself too, legally and finally, in a divorce that was neither dramatic nor kind, just quiet and inevitable, like a leak you ignore until the ceiling comes down. His older son, Damon, was 21 and in college in Atlanta, and called on Sundays when he remembered. Franklin worked at an engineering firm now, a step up from the plant, his mother had always said, as if elevation could be measured in zip codes and job titles. He managed a small team, wore a collared shirt every day, kept his head down. He was not an unhappy man. He was a man who had learned to ask less from the days than they were willing to give. He pulled a jacket off the hook by the door and grabbed his keys. Outside, the night was the kind of cold that comes not from winter but from a sky with no clouds to hold the warmth in. He drove with the radio off. The streets were empty and orange-lit, the kind of empty that makes a city feel like it belongs to someone else after dark. He saw her before he even turned into the lot. Renata Ose was sitting on the curb near the entrance, knees pulled up, a jacket that wasn't warm enough wrapped around her shoulders. She had a single bag beside her, not a suitcase, just a canvas tote, the kind you get free at a grocery store and end up keeping because it's useful. That bag told him more than anything she could have said on the phone. He pulled up slow and rolled down the window. She looked up and something in her face shifted. Not relief exactly, more like the moment just before relief, when you've been holding your breath so long that you'd almost forgotten you were holding it. Hey, he said. Hey. She stood up, picked up the bag. Thank you for coming. Get in. She did. She buckled her seatbelt with the automatic precision of someone whose hands needed something to do. He turned the heat up without her asking. He pulled out of the lot and onto Route 9, heading back toward his neighborhood, and for a few minutes neither of them said anything. The heater hummed. The road was long and straight and empty. Then she said, "He changed the locks." Franklin kept his eyes on the road. When tonight, while I was at my shift. She worked evenings at the hospital, medical records, not nursing, though people always assumed. I came home at 11:30 and my key didn't work. I knocked for 20 minutes. His car was in the driveway. He was home. He was home. Franklin's jaw tightened. He let a moment pass before he said anything, because he was the kind of man who knew that some responses needed a breath between the feeling and the words. How long has it been like this? He asked. She was quiet. Renata, a while, she said. It's been a while, Frank. He'd known Renata Ose for almost 4 years. They'd met through a community board they'd both been talked into joining. Something about park renovations and neighborhood input, the kind of civic duty that sounds meaningful until you're sitting in a church basement at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday for the 3rd time in a month, arguing about whether the new benches should have armrests. She'd made a point in the second meeting that cut straight through 40 minutes of circular discussion, and he'd thought, who is she, exactly? They'd become friends the way adults become friends. Slowly, mostly by accident, through proximity and repeated exposure and the slow accumulation of small honestnesses. Coffee after meetings. Text threads that started as logistics and turned into something else. He knew she liked her coffee with too much sugar. He knew she'd grown up in Ghana and come to the States for college and never quite left. He knew her laugh, genuine versus polite, and which one she used with him. He knew she was married to a man named Clifton, who Franklin had met exactly twice at neighborhood events, and both times had found reasons to leave the conversation early. He had never said that to Renata. Some things you hold back not because they're untrue, but because saying them would change things, and you're not sure you're ready for the things to change. He lived on Alderman Street, a quiet block of single-family homes with big yards and old trees that went gold in October. His house was the one with the porch light always on, a habit from when Damon was in high school and kept unpredictable hours. He pulled into the driveway and cut the engine. "You don't have to stay on my account," Renata said, though she hadn't moved toward the door. "I live here," he said. She almost smiled. Inside, he put her bag down in the hallway and turned on the kitchen light. The house was clean in the way houses get clean when no one comes over often. Not spotless, but deliberate. She stood in the entry and looked around with the careful attention of someone who'd heard about a place but never been inside. He put the kettle on. She sat at the kitchen table, the same table where he'd been sitting an hour ago with his unread mail, and folded her hands in front of her. And he could see her trying to decide how much of what she was feeling she was going to let show. "I have a guest room," he said, not as an offer but as a statement, to make it simple. "Frank, I can't. The sheets are clean. Damon uses it when he comes home." He set a mug in front of her and sat down across. "You don't have to figure anything out tonight. You just have to sleep." She looked at the mug. Steam curled up from it. "I keep thinking I should be angrier," she said. "I expected to be angrier, but mostly I'm just tired." "That's what anger does when it's been going on long enough," he said. "It stops burning hot and starts burning cold. You don't feel it the same way. It just takes up space." She looked up at him. "When did you get wise? I had a good divorce." That surprised a small, real laugh out of her, the genuine kind. He got up and found the extra blanket he kept in the hall closet. He put it on the back of a chair for her. "He didn't make a production of it," she said. "Tell me something that has nothing to do with any of this, anything." He thought for a second. Then he said, "Damon called on Sunday. He's thinking about changing his major." "To what?" "He doesn't know yet. He said he just knows the current one." "Isn't it? What is it currently?" "Business." "And what does he want it to be?" "He said maybe architecture. Or philosophy." She shook her head slowly. "The way you do when something is both absurd and completely right. My God. The audacity of 21, right? I remember thinking I had all the time in the world to figure it out." Her voice went somewhere quieter on that sentence, the way voices do when they're talking about one thing but meaning something else. "You were probably right," he said. "You probably still are." She looked at him for a moment, and he let her look. Then she said goodnight, picked up the blanket, and disappeared down the hall. In the morning, Franklin found her sitting on the back step with her phone and a cup of coffee she'd made herself. She'd figured out the machine, which Damon never managed to do without asking 3 times. The yard was still in the way that early October mornings are still. Cool air, gold light slanting through the old maple at the back fence, the neighborhood just starting to move. He came out with his own cup and sat on the step beside her, not close enough to intrude, not far enough to signal distance. "I called my sister," she said. "She's in Charlotte. She wants me to come." "Okay, I'm thinking about it." He nodded. "And I talked to a lawyer an hour ago. She said it like she was testing the weight of it. I mean, I texted her. She's a friend of a friend. But she texted back already, which I think is a good sign. That is a good sign. Renata looked out at the yard. A bird landed on the fence, considered something, and left. He's going to say I abandoned the house, she said. He's strategic like that. He'll say I left. You didn't leave. He locked you out. I know. She turned the mug in her hands, but he's good at making the story whatever he needs it to be. He always has been. I spent so long arguing with the story instead of just walking out of it. Franklin didn't say anything right away. He'd learned, across the past few years of knowing her, that Renata didn't need her thoughts finished for her. She needed them witnessed. "Can I say something?" he said. "Yeah. You've been practical your whole life. You came here by yourself, built your career, kept your head straight when a lot of people wouldn't have. You're going to be okay. Not because someone's going to rescue you, because you already know how to do the work." He paused. "But that doesn't mean you have to do it without anywhere to land." She was quiet for a moment. The maple tree moved slightly in the breeze. "You know what Clifton would say if he knew I was here," she said. "I can imagine. He'd make it into something. Let him." She looked over at him. "You're not worried about what people will say?" "I'm 44, he said. "I stopped arranging my life around what people might say somewhere around 41. It's very freeing. Highly recommend." She laughed again. The real one. He was starting to lose count of how many times he'd heard it in the past 12 hours, and he thought, that should have been a more regular thing. That should not have been rationed. She stayed 2 nights. She was clear about it. Not in a way that felt like she was managing him, but in a way that felt like she was managing herself, drawing her own lines so that no one else had to. On the second morning, she sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open and a yellow legal pad covered in her handwriting. She was making lists. Renata was a list maker. He'd always known that about her, but these lists had a different quality. They weren't the lists of someone organizing a project. They were the lists of someone building a floor to stand on. He made eggs. He didn't ask what the list said. "I called my job," she said without looking up. "I can work remotely for a few weeks if I need to." "Good." "And my sister found an apartment. Short-term lease. It's not great, but it's not terrible. When would you go? End of the week." She wrote something else, crossed something out. "I'm not running. I want to be clear about that. I'm just not going to stand in that parking lot waiting for someone to let me back in." He set a plate in front of her and sat down. "I didn't think you were running," he said. She finally looked up. There was something in her face that was different from the night she'd arrived. Still tired, still complicated, but less like someone bracing and more like someone standing straight. "I've been thinking about what you said," she told him. "About somewhere to land. Yeah, I think I've been refusing to need that for a long time. I thought needing it was the same as being weak. It's not. I know." She picked up her fork. "I'm slow sometimes." "You're not slow," he said. "You're careful. There's a difference." She considered that. "I'm going to work on believing that. Take your time." She left on a Friday. He helped her carry 2 bags. A second one had appeared, a proper duffel. After Clifton had finally responded to her messages and left a box of her things on the front porch of the house, with a note that said nothing worth repeating, she'd picked it up with her sister on the phone, narrating the whole thing in a voice so dry it was almost funny, and Franklin had sat in his car 2 houses down in case she needed him and tried to figure out what exactly he was feeling. He drove her to the train station. She had a carry-on and the canvas tote and the kind of quiet that isn't empty but full, like a room between 2 conversations. At the drop-off, she got out and came around to his window. He rolled it down. "Thank you," she said. "I mean it. I know you do. I'll call when I get there. You don't have to. I want to." She tilted her head slightly. "Is that okay?" "Yes," he said. "That's okay." She stood there for one more second, looking at him with the clear-eyed steadiness that had been the first thing he'd ever noticed about her. That quality of looking at a thing straight on, not past it, not around it. "I'm not the same person I was 3 days ago," she said. "I don't mean that dramatically. I just mean, I think I needed someone to not ask anything from me for a minute, so I could figure out what I actually wanted." He nodded. "What do you actually want?" She smiled. Not the polite one. The real one, the one that had started appearing more regularly over the past 2 days. The one he suspected the last several years of her life had been doing its best to ration away. "I'll let you know when I get there," she said. She picked up her bag and walked into the station, and he watched until she was through the doors. He sat in the drop-off lane for a moment longer than he should have, with cars beginning to queue behind him, thinking about the particular kind of quiet that fills a space when someone you care about has just stepped into their own life, and you've had the privilege of being the place they rested before they did. Then he put the car in drive and headed home. The porch light was on when he got there. It was always on. He made coffee. He sat at the kitchen table. He picked up the stack of mail he'd been avoiding and started going through it, one envelope at a time, in the ordinary light of an ordinary morning. His phone buzzed at 11:43. "Made it. Charlotte is warmer than I expected." "Thank you, Frank. For real." He read it twice. Then he put the phone face up on the table, went back to the mail, and let himself smile. There are people who show up at 3 in the morning. Not because they're heroes. Heroes make a production of it. They show up because someone they care about is sitting on a curb in the cold, and the only question that matters is, where are you? The rest you figure out together, in the kitchen light, over coffee that gets cold before either of you drinks it. That's not rescue. That's just what it looks like when someone decides you're worth getting up for.